and welcome to the Hybrid School Builders Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Foley, and I am so glad you are joining me today. I am a fellow grassroots founder who is hoping to make your journey toward founding a sustainable hybrid school a little bit easier. If you are dreaming of starting a hybrid school, or perhaps you've already gotten started, you are in the right place. Join me as we dive into real stories, practical tips, and hard-won lessons that I have learned to help you launch and grow your program with confidence. Remember, building a hybrid school is not just about creating a business or creating jobs. It's not even about just serving the children who attend the program. It's literally about reshaping the landscape of education, and we can do that one community, one entrepreneur, and one program at a time. Hi. So I want to do a quick episode just outlining the difference between the various models of alternative schools, entrepreneurial ventures that are coming out, especially in the last 5-6 years. A lot of stuff happened during the pandemic, learning pods, micro schools that kind of started during that time. I feel like the vocabulary around this is still being formed. And it's still being defined. So I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of how I see the terms playing out. I think there's still some room for more definition in these, but hopefully we can all work together on that and use the terms to mean similar things. Okay, so if you go back, 20, 30 years, homeschool cooperatives had started back when homeschooling started picking up in the 80s and 90s in America. And these were just what they sound like. They were a bunch of homeschool families who cooperated to share education with the kids. They'd be once a month, twice a month, maybe weekly. And the fee was usually very low. They would often meet at a church or a park or something like that. Various sizes, a few families to dozens and dozens of families. And the defining part of this, and it's been around for a while, is that it is cooperative. So parents generally have to do something. They often cannot drop their kids off. I think there are more models that are moving more and more toward that, especially with older kids, where you can drop your kids off if you're serving in some way. Or perhaps you can charge a higher fee, pay a higher fee, and then you don't have to volunteer as much. But then someone's getting paid. So it's moving further away from the cooperative model. But in general, it's cooperative. You have to teach something or maybe help in the nursery or clean the building. You have to claim some job and perform it. And some other parent is maybe teaching history and you're teaching science to all the kids. Okay. It's a great model. It's been around for a long time. It's very affordable. And people really like this model. Okay. These are often nonprofits and they're all over the place. It's a successful model, and it still is. And this is in the whole school world, obviously. Okay, we know what private schools are. We know what public schools are. And hybrid schools, I think, I believe in the early 2000s, don't quote me on this, but I believe in the early 2000s was when the National Association of University Model Schools, I think that's what they're still called, which a couple of people founded the idea of a university model school, and they coined that term as it essentially is a hybrid school. But this is a network, a specific network that uses that name, which is the university model school. The university model school is called that because it's a part-time, Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that sort of model that a university will use. Kids go to class, and then they have homework, and that's how they learn their stuff, right? And that I think it especially became popular for several schools within the classical tradition, and also with high schoolers, because high schoolers are able to handle a lot more independently, and they can take high school classes 2 or 3 times a week and have their homework at home. And it's a great way for them to learn independence and take the classes that they want to take and specialize in what they want to specialize, graduate, and be more than ready for college, right? It's a great model for high schoolers, okay? And I think that university model, it was a great, intro to the hybrid sort of model, the school home model. From my research, those are very popular within the classical school tradition. I think they're probably excellent schools. And there is a network of them that use that name, as I understand it. Okay, so that's been around for maybe 20 years-ish. Okay, now hybrid schools, the hybrid school I started was in 2017, so this was pre-pandemic. And I will also note that the pandemic kind of hijacked the term, in my opinion, because during the pandemic, they were using the word hybrid for online and on campus. If you recall this, students were hybrid learning, as in they were sitting in Zoom meetings at home, and then they were going to school like 2 days a week for like a year, maybe a year and a half or 2 years there for a while, 2020, 21. So for a little bit of time, there was like somebody wrote a book, and there was a few resources that were using the word hybrid learning, but it meant online and on campus. Now, I had started teaching for a local university an economics class that was called a hybrid class, and that's what it was. I think about half of the hours were in class. It was like one night a week for several hours, and then the rest of the hours were delivered online, and it was a hybrid class, and this was before pandemic. So the word was being used for online and on campus hybrid. Okay. Now, when we started the hybrid school and we chose that, we had researched and we had found several programs that used the word hybrid for hybrid homeschool. And so there was school was part of the hybrid, and the other part of the hybrid was homeschooling, like actual homeschooling. It was very rarely actually online, even though that's, becoming more and more popular with like online charter schools and all of that kind of thing. But it just meant that parents were homeschooling and the kids were going to school part-time. And the distinguishing feature between that and a co-op was that it was an actual like part-time school functionally. It may not have been a legal school. I talk about that in a previous episode. But it was definitely a combination of going to school and homeschooling, like at home with your parent or independent. Okay. And I think that's why that term has gotten a little like, what do we really mean by hybrid? And it's not really used that much, I feel like. But it does seem like a pretty good term for it. The only other one I can ever think of is part-time school, even though that's probably a little more descriptive. It just doesn't sound the same. And there were other hybrid academies in the, we were in 2017, 2016, when we were starting, that we did find online, not that many of them, but they were using the word hybrid for the same exact model that we were building. Now, along came the pandemic, and not only was the hybrid hijacked a little bit, or at least became more popular for the online hybrid, but also these learning pods started. If you remember, the word learning pod came into use, and those were when a few families were pulling together, just a few kids, and they were learning together in like a small group. And this was working out for a lot of people. And combined with a lot of the other stuff that was happening during the pandemic of people's awareness of what the public schools were doing and how the kids are spending their time and all of that, and then seeing how their kids were responding to these learning pods, micro schools were then, I think, born out of that experiment, right? That kind of experiment that happened out of necessity to deal with the situation. And then teachers, a lot of times teachers, decided, well, wait, I could like run my own little school, like from my home or at a community or some other smaller space, not a huge facility, and just take in 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 kids. And I could like run a business like with this little teeny private school. And a lot of times the ages are combined. It's not like a graded room. It could be, but a lot of times they seem to be, combining a few different ages together and not like distinguishing like, well, this is only a first grade micro school, because that doesn't usually work that well because you're very limited to your size. So you might take, 6 through 10-year-olds and that's the group you have or whatever. So learning pods and micro schools took off, and they are still taking off. And a lot of like burnout teachers or parents who really have a passion for doing education differently than they were doing in the public schools or even in private schools are like, oh, I can actually like go teach the way that I want to teach and own my own business. Okay. And that is the micro school model. It's a great model, and, people can do it from their home a lot of times. And I've seen some networks pop up since then, like KaiPod and Prenda And there's some other ones just in the last few years that help give resources to microschool founders specifically, which is needed because there's a lot of legal stuff and all of that needs to be dealt with, especially if it's a full-time school situation. Okay. So that's the way that I understand these. I think that microschools can really be a great little business for teachers. They are often more expensive because they're often full-time. And even though there may not be as many facility costs, there's still a lot of costs, and the teacher usually has to make a salary, a living to like quit their job and do this full time. So that has to be spread over, 6 or 8 kids, whatever, which is often more expensive than say a homeschooling or a cooperative or a hybrid school. But you also don't need as many kids. So, it is what it is. It's a particular model. Some of them also are hybrid in the sense that they do only meet part-time, and then the parents are still homeschooling, but they're micro in the sense that they're very small. Now, I know some people will I have heard the term microschool applied to schools like Providence Hybrid Academy, which is the school that I co-founded, which has over 200 kids in it now. And I was like, well, I don't know if I would consider it a micro school. I mean, I consider a micro school like 10 or 20 kids at the most. That's why it's micro. It's small. I would say we're a little bigger than that. But it's certainly smaller than a traditional public school. But it's more around the size of like a Christian school or a private school. So I don't really like using the term micro school for a part-time school that looks very much like a private school. It just means part-time, and it's larger, 50 or 80 or 100 plus kids. I just don't really, I think the term for micro school should be used for the small individualized programs with just under 20 kids in them. And then I think hybrid schools should be defined by the word hybrid, that they're hybrid home schools. They meet part-time, but they look a lot more like schools, part-time schools. So that's how I like to use the terminology. I think it helps, standardize the words, if everyone was using the words that way. But like I said, it's like a new frontier of how we're using the words and how we're defining it and what these programs even look like and what people are seeing, and what they're describing. And sometimes people haven't even heard of them yet, and they don't really know what we're talking about. So I think that, using the terms in a common way will help as we move forward into this. And so where everybody's talking about the same thing. So they all have their benefits and their pros and cons. Like I said, microschools tend to be a little more expensive. One of the biggest things about hybrid schools that I really like is the larger community, the sense of school. Like it just feels just exactly like a school when you're in it on those days. And it's usually from the ones that I've seen and the one that I built, it's grade, they're grades, the classroom's grades, and there's a teacher and a grade. And when they get older, maybe there's a history teacher, science teacher, whatever. In elementary, it's usually like a grade teacher, 5th grade teacher, 4th grade teacher, class of kids. And they're moving up through the school that way. And it's a lot more affordable, usually a half or a third of what a private school is. I think the average is around $3,400. Ours is still under $3,000 a year. And you can deliver an awful lot of a private school experience for a fraction of the price, which makes it a lot more accessible to a lot more people and really fills that like niche of, private school is too expensive. Homeschool seems overwhelming, or it's just too much of a commitment. I need to work part-time or whatever. It like just hits that sweet spot there. So here I am advocating for hybrid schools because I like them, and that's the model that I know the best. But I just wanted to kind of cover those terms so that you understand what I'm talking about when I say it, and hopefully we can all use a common language. Thanks so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you check out the resources I am developing at startahybridSchool.com. Send me an email anytime. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.